For the past 23 years, the 3-day Platteville Historic Re-enactment has showcased the history of America's Upper Mississippi Valley from the mid-1700s to 1840. Featuring educators, artisans, and reenactors all taking part in the celebration, the Historic Reenactment presents a hands-on living history experience for the general public, as well as thousands of students and teachers whose visit enhances their educational curriculum.
Our goal for this video is to give you some inspiration and tools to use as you work with your students. We hope it will spark some memories of past visits to the Historic Reenactment and build anticipation for future visits. A brief explanation of the format. There are 5 areas of emphasis. Each area will have an introduction and a group of photographs. There will also be a group of questions for you and your students to think about, discuss, and research on your own or in small groups. You know your students the best. Use the questions that are the best fit. You will notice that we do not provide any answers to the questions. Self-discovery is part of the thrill of doing history. We want your students to experience this firsthand. Craftspeople were vital to the survival and growth of 18th and 19th century society. Remember, there were no Walmarts or hardware stores for people to shop in. Each item that you used in your daily life or work had to be made by someone. Blacksmiths. What metal does he use to make tools or utensils? What is the fuel in the forge? Why were blacksmiths needed on the frontier? How long does it take to make a simple tool or utensil? Woodworkers. What kinds of items do they make? How long does it take to make a canoe paddle? Are some woods easier to shape than others? What are some of the tools they would use? Seamstresses. What fabrics were used for clothing in the 18th century? What plants, animals, and insects produced the fibers for these fabrics? How did people get new clothing? What determines the cost of a new garment? Candle makers. What were candles made of in the 18th century? Where did the ingredients come from? What are the 2 methods of making candles? Silversmithing. What metals are combined to make German silver? Why was German silver used? How and why did the silversmith create the designs used? What did Native Americans trade to get silver jewelry and decorations? Fur trade. The fur trade played a significant role in the exploration and settlement of North America. Trade began with the first European explorers and grew to a worldwide business. Some men worked for themselves, while others were employed by a large company. Coureur de bois fur traders. What does coureur de bois mean? Who did the coureur de bois fur traders work for? Name the companies that fur traders worked for. Where did these companies hold their great rendezvous or have their headquarters? Some fur traders married Native American women. Can you think of any advantages that these traders might have had because of their native wives? Mountain men. After the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812, Americans pushed west into new lands, meeting, trading, and sometimes fighting with the native tribes that lived there. Once it was discovered that the western rivers, streams, and forests were full of fur-bearing animals, men headed into the plains and mountains to hunt and trap them. The American Fur Trade Company sent annual caravans to meet with the trappers and hunters. There were fewer rivers that could be used to travel by boat, so the caravans had to travel, at least part of the way, cross-country. What animals did they trap? Which mountains did they trap in? What does the word rendezvous mean? Where did the mountain men hold their rendezvous? What was the purpose of the rendezvous? What articles were manufactured with the furs and skins that were trapped by the mountain men? Voyageurs. The voyageurs were the truck drivers of the fur trade, and the rivers and lakes were their highways. What nationality were most of the voyageurs? Where did they live when they weren't paddling canoes? What language did most of them speak? Canoes. What are the canoes made of? How big could they be? How many men paddled the canoe? Paddling and portaging. Using a map, calculate how many miles a trip from Montreal, Canada to Green Bay is, traveling only by water. What waterways were most important to the voyageurs in the region now known as Wisconsin? How far could they travel in one day? What is a portage? How many pounds could one voyager carry at one time over a portage? What was packed in the canoe? Remember, voyagers were camping along the way. What kinds of trade goods were packed? How were the trade goods packed? What did the voyagers eat? How many pounds could a canoe carry? Some voyagers, along with some fur traders, married Native American women. What is the term, hint, it's a French word, that is used to describe the descendants of these parents? In some provinces of Canada and in the upper Great Lakes states of the United States, there are large numbers of these descendants of the fur trade. Military. Soldiers were stationed off and on in what is now Wisconsin starting in the mid-1750s. What countries governed what is now Wisconsin before the United States? Why were soldiers in Wisconsin? Were there any battles fought in Wisconsin? What effect did the Black Hawk War have on southern Wisconsin? What did soldiers do while in camp? What did soldiers do for fun? What kinds of food did soldiers eat? Native Americans. There have been people living in what is now Wisconsin for at least 13,000 years. They learned how to use what nature provided to live their lives. Some of the native people migrated from other parts of North America into what is now Wisconsin. What tribes have lived in Wisconsin? Where did some of these tribes come from? What tribes still live in Wisconsin? Where do tribes who used to live in Wisconsin live now? How do Native Americans, both in the past and now, pass down important history, religious ideas, and other information from one generation to the next? When and how did they interact with Europeans and Americans? Some Native American women married European or American men. Why might the women think this was a good idea? What did Native Americans have that was valuable to Europeans and Americans and that they could use for fur trade? Remember, we live in southwest Wisconsin. What kinds of items did they receive in exchange? How do casinos and tourism play a role in the lives of present-day Native Americans in Wisconsin?